Hello, everyone. Hope you can all hear us. I'm Sean Peterson.
And I'm Lynn Schofield, and happy Hatch Day.
Yeah, we're all excited to share this exciting with you. We have one chick who has hatched already. It's like another one is working on, and so hopefully we'll have all 4 chicks ready to hatch.
I don't know how many of the chicks will ultimately end up hatching. In the past, we have yet to have a full clutch of 4 camps, but we're hoping for this year. But we won't find out for a bit because the span of time between pip to hatch, so when we first see a crack to when the bird finally hatches, can be as little as a few hours, but as much as 2 full days to complete the process. So we will know for sure how many chicks we have to say happy birthday to very soon. I'm told our audio is coming in and out. Oh no, poor audio. We should use my computer. Is there a way to switch computers really fast?
Yes.
Okay.
Bear with us one moment while we get our technical difficulties figured out.
Are we doing better?
Are we doing better? Sounds better now. Okay.
All right,
awesome.
Great.
Well, in case we do cut out again, we'll try to switch to a different computer. Technology, it's fun. So yeah, the hatching process for chicks is a long and kind of hard process. The chicks are basically carving their way out of their eggs, and they are working really hard to hatch their eggs.
Yeah, so the thing about hatching of the eggs, because people do ask how long is it going to take, and then do the parents help, because we have said before that it's a really difficult process for the chicks to get out of eggs. And the thing is that the parents can only help a limited, their design is such that they open from the inside out. And so from the outside, an adult can remove shell, but they're not able to actually do any of the effort to break the shell. So instead, the chicks have a little egg tooth at the very tip of the bill that they use to make the initial crack, and then very strong neck and back muscles that they use to open the egg.
Today, we're here to answer all your questions, celebrate Hatch Day, and everyone know what's going on, anything about Cal Falcons, Peregrine Falcons, life.
He is the smaller of the two.
You're having some serious technical difficulties. The audio issues back up again. All right, we're going to try getting a different computer going.
Yep.
Bear with us one moment. Sorry about Hello, everyone.
All right, we're back.
Hopefully, we're back. All right, we're going to try to get the birds in the background because that's the fun part.
Yep. We're nice and all, but having falcons in the background is the reason we are all here, to enjoy the fluffy chicks and to hopefully get a couple opportunities to see the adults get off of the chicks, interact with the chicks, and see how they're doing. And hopefully we might start to see some more evidence of hatching very soon. All right.
Here we go.
We got to get that's the one. Okay, we got screen share. We got us. We got audio.
All right. Got audio.
All right. So let's get to some people's questions now that we have addressed some of this stuff. Okay. So
got a question about the prey that Lou brings in. So we have had some pretty small prey today. We have had a least sandpiper brought in for the chicks. And typically male peregrine falcons hunt smaller prey than females because they're smaller birds. And often, while the chicks are really young, Lou will concentrate on hunting these small animals. They eventually probably will switch mostly to pigeons, but today and for a little bit, we'll probably see a lot of small birds.
Yep, this is true. And, part of the reason that, a lot of times Lou brings in bigger prey, because I got somewhere here, we had another question about, has Lou been generally bringing in bigger prey relative to previous males that have been on the territory? And it is true that Lou overall, especially relative to Alden, is bringing in larger prey. And this is really just because of learned behavior by individual falcons. Alden was clearly specializing on birds that he was catching out over the flatlands in the ocean. He almost always brought in seabirds, whereas Lou seems to be doing a good amount of his hunting closer into town, bringing in a lot of pigeons and robins and blackbirds. But very soon, once there are more chicks in the nest that need more feeding and more attention and time, they will probably be bringing in any prey item that they're able to get opportunistically. And someone also, I saw this comment on social media as well. The first feeding, it seemed like Annie was getting a lot of feathers being fed to the chicks during that first feeding. And it does help to get a little bit of roughage into the chicks to start getting the gizzard working, but usually they do try to focus on small pieces of, mostly meat. So it's actually a bit of an interesting observation that we were seeing a lot of feathers in that first feeding. Oh, and look, Annie is demonstrating to us a very common bird behavior where she's starting to eat a little bit of the shell, which is a great source of extra calcium. And also, typically a bird, falcons, as well as any others, don't like to have the white portion of the shell showing and out away from them because it is just bright and draws that much more extra attention. So she will probably either get that out of the way or end up eating it entirely.
This is a great question. Any thoughts on Lou? Personality? Good dad. I have been really enjoying Lou. It's been really, I think, fascinating. I think for the people who followed this nest for a number of years now, to see the differences between the three male falcons that have spent time here. Grinnell, Lou, and Alden have all been very different. And I think it's been interesting to see those differences. Lou, he has really enjoyed incubating the eggs, I think, to an extent that Alden and Grinnell really didn't. he's often had to kind of maybe fight with Annie a little bit, or they've had conversations about whose turn it is to do eggs. So I really enjoyed that aspect.
Yeah, for sure. Lou definitely spends more time incubating and is more reluctant to cease incubating than other males that we have had, Alden and Grinnell. So that's a pretty endearing trait of Lou. Here's a question. How could you be so sure? Oh, look, Annie's back. Let's see. Did Annie bring any food, or are they just trading places? All right, Lou maybe was a lot more willing to hop off the nest this time.
Maybe having something squirming under there was a little bit different.
Yeah. Okay, so how did we know they would hatch today? Is the gestation time that accurate? And short answer, yes. At least we're very confident that, assuming that they were developing normally and being consistently incubated, at least one would be hatched at this point. Typically, the eggs hatch at approximately the same window of about a day apart, but the egg that's laid first will often hatch a little bit earlier than the others. And also, some chicks are just able to get out of the eggs a little more efficiently than others, as we had mentioned. For some chicks, it can take up to 2 days to go between the first crack and coming out. But yes, assuming incubation is going correctly, it really is within that amount of time. And we have been watching this nest now since 2018. So we have been able to kind of look at the data and how long it has taken from laying to hatch for Annie specifically. So that helps as well.
And like, I lost my train of thought. It's something that we have collected the data on, and we have this have had a lot of experience on the Cal Falcons team in kind of studying these birds, and it is remarkably consistent. And we've been monitoring their activities to make sure that the nest is being incubated at a rate that we would expect, and they have been really good about that.
All right, here's one of those. This is a really good question. I do not know the answer. Do you? Are they more likely to hatch in the daylight?
I think most of the hatches that we've seen here have been during the daylight, but I don't know how much of that is driven by, the bird, the chick kind of being encouraged to hatch during daylight hours, or if it's just chance.
Yeah, I mean the shell is able to let some amount of light through. There could be some circadian cycle to that. As Sean mentioned, they might be encouraged a little more by the adults, which are very, very quietly vocalizing to the chicks right before they are hatching, which, roughly speaking, if you want to anthropomorphize it a bit, they are kind of encouraging the chicks to hatch. All right. So, assuming he's safe and thriving, what do you think Grinnell Jr. is doing right now? What would a falcon of his age be up to?
That's a great question. So most falcons do not breed in their first full year after they've hatched. There are some very rare number of juvenile falcons. They're called juveniles in their second year that will do so. There's one currently breeding at San Jose City Hall that is a juvenile. And it just doesn't happen very much. Usually they're looking for their own territories, learning how to hunt, and finding their way in the world. So hopefully he's out there looking for his own spot and maybe looking to set up a territory for next year.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, sometimes a juvenile will find a territory in their first year of life, but most of the time it takes several years of being what we kind of casually refer to as a floater before an individual is able to find a territory that is available, that they're able to find a mate at. So, for example, Grinnell, when the original male who was on the Berkeley territory, He hatched in 2013 and did not find the Berkeley territory until 2017. And based on behavior, we suspected that was his first season breeding. So it took him 4 years before he found his own home. Let's see, where are we next?
Sure.
Okay, so people are always asking really difficult questions. So what are the limitations when the chicks are hatching? Can they suffocate? Do they need to break out before they need to eat? And it is true, suffocation can be an issue if they're not able to break out, because if they are not able to make that push to open the shell, they can have their airway restricted. Dehydration is also very possible if they're spending a significant amount of time working to open the egg.
So hatching is when we think about this in like kind of a biological evolutionary context, is a little bit of a self-limiting thing. A lot of chicks, when they hatch, are fairly strong. They survive fairly well and develop fairly well, and that's often because hatching kind of prevents chicks that have developmental issues, that don't have bones or don't have muscles in the correct places, from being able to get out. So it's kind of one of those first big steps that the chicks need to get over, and sometimes that can be difficult for them.
Yeah, and to be honest, usually when an egg doesn't hatch, it is not because the chick inside was unable to open the egg. Usually the reason it doesn't hatch is because for some reason it was unable to develop in the first place. This could be because of inadequate incubation, although we don't suspect that to have been the case this season. It could be because sometimes individuals just lay infertile eggs, or it could be because there is some small cracking or something that damaged the shell early on. So we have observed once that we had a chick that started to hatch and wasn't able to emerge, but most of the time when an egg hatches, it was because the chick did not develop in the first place.
I really love this question. Alden used to have a storage cache of food. Have you observed Lou doing this as well, or was that just an Alden trait?
Yeah, so we were able to observe where Alden was putting food after he had caught it before he had brought it to Annie or the chicks. We knew he was doing that on Evans Hall. It was a little bit of luck that observers on the ground were able to find that out. Bridget Ahern, Moon Rabbit Rising on Instagram, she's the fantastic photographer that makes a lot of these observations. Insofar, we haven't found a storage cache that Lou is using, but that doesn't mean he's not doing it, and it's possible he, like Grinnell, could have the storage cache just right above the nest box level where we probably wouldn't necessarily be noticing. All right. Let's see. So given his behavior with the incubation, do you think Lou will be the most involved with the chicks of any of Annie's partners?
It's really hard to say. This is our first season with Lou, and given he was really excited about incubation, it could be, you might want to think that maybe he will be really feeding the chicks a lot more than some of the other males have at this nest. But one that behavior doesn't exactly translate to another, and Annie actually controls a lot of who gets to feed the chicks, so she might just be the one who goes up and takes the food and takes on that responsibility.
Yeah, and we do know that of the previous males, Alden was the one who did not do as much incubation as Grinnell, but Alden was also the only. Alden is actually, we observed him feeding the chicks on a few occasions, which Grinnell never made attempts to feed the chicks. So Grinnell did more incubation, but never attempted to feed, and Alden did not do much incubation, relatively speaking. He did his fair share, but did not do as much incubation relative to Grinnell. But he did make efforts to feed the chicks. So we will find out what Lou tends to do in the future here.
All right, where is Lou at night? Does he stand on watch to guard the nest box, or is he off somewhere else catching Z's? Uh, Most of the time, the male falcons have spent time on the tower at night, typically perched in a bit more of a secluded spot. Very rarely are they perching on other buildings. They are usually staying pretty close to the nest box, but usually in a pretty protected area. Still keeping an eye on things. I don't know if we know exactly where Lou's preferred sleeping spot is.
Yeah, he tends to spend more time near the clock's face in the evenings, is observations that have been made. And but we know he's nearby because when there has been danger occurring at night, he has moved into action very quickly. So we know he's in view of the nest site, wherever it is he's roosting.
Okay, so when will banding happen and when will fledging happen?
So banding is not scheduled, but there is a relatively limited period of time where banding is safe for the birds and something that can be easily accomplished by biologists, because there needs to be two things that have happened. The chicks need to be old enough that their legs are fully grown. So when they're fitted with the unique number band and visual identification band that you can see from a distance, they need to be fully grown in the legs so the band fits and will not change fit at all as they get older. And so, being raptors, birds of prey, their feet are one of the first things to develop, and they're the first thing to become full size on the bird. So luckily, you have fully sized feet before the birds have formed feathers and before they have any ability to move quickly or to fly. So banding needs to occur sometime after you have fully developed legs, but before the birds have feathers moving in or the ability to move quickly, so you're not liable to spook the chicks and cause them to flail around or to get up high or out of the way. So that is, what is the approximate dates of that happens?
Day 21 to 25, somewhere in there.
Okay, yeah.
So usually about 3 weeks in, maybe a little more. There's some wiggle room there, but we try to keep it safe so the birds are safe.
Yeah, and so then fledge date, we actually have calculated out our fledging dates based on previous data for how long it has taken Annie's chicks to fledge. And we expect it's going to be around May 20th through the 23rd, depending on whether the chicks are male or female. Affects how quickly they grow and develop. Males, because they're smaller, develop a little more quickly and are ready to fledge a little sooner. Females will be usually a couple days later, but that is about when we're expecting them to take their first flights. And this one is harder to predict. It can vary by multiple days, just based on the personality of the chick and when they are ready to make that first jump.
There's a question here about drone activity. I actually don't know about drone activity at that particular time. You had also previously asked a question about the people on the tower. There was a moment where some of the facility staff mistakenly went up to the top, and we are making sure that that doesn't happen again. The drones, though, are a constant threat for peregrine falcons and other nesting raptors. And so it is illegal for the wildlife or to harass wildlife with drones. And if anyone's a drone pilot who's listening in, we ask you to please be careful around where you're flying drones, especially where wildlife are around.
Yeah, and just a kind of a general comment about these kinds of disturbances. So facilities, when they came up to the tower, Lou was there, and Lou very quickly sped into action, and the people coming up realized that they had made a mistake and they had left. And so from Lou's perspective, he was very effective at defending his nest.
And, usually that's the case. Repeated entrances into the nest site will cause the birds to think again about attempting to nest there in the future if they perceive that there is a continuing threat. But what's a real issue, the reason the drones we are particularly concerned about is because the drones to the falcons look a lot more like an aerial predator potentially, which means either a competitor or aerial predators are one of the few things that are true threats to the peregrine falcon chicks. Ravens, crows, and great horned owls are one of the, those are the primary predators. So the drones are perceived as a greater threat typically by the peregrine falcons, or if they're perceived as a possible prey item, and the bird dives at them, they risk also injuring themselves on that as well. So they're more likely to injure themselves interacting with the drone. They're more likely to perceive it as a significant threat. And drone activity has just been increasing to a pretty frequent occurrence. So we really want to try our best to get the word out that flying the drones near the campanile is it's a potential problem. So
yeah,
we're
we really appreciate.
We just want to get the word out. I know a lot of drone operators just don't know. A lot of people, aren't aware, but it happens. Also, and just as a little throwaway comment, somebody asked, "Could you make the Falcon cam full screen?" And
cannot. We've been having a technical glitch with the streaming setup, so if I put it full screen, it pauses, unfortunately. So sorry, but we're kind of stuck.
Technical glitches. We're a mom and pop situation over here, so we're doing our best.
Susan Cheng asks, "We have a new 12-story building in Sunnyvale. So what would we get on this box?" Great question. I actually don't know what the best way to attract a bird to a box. You can build a box yourself. There are instructions on various places online.
So there's kind of two basic, types of nest boxes. You can get some that are fully covered and take a little more entrance, or ones that are essentially just the tray of gravel, both of which have pros and cons, because the ones that are covered are sometimes feel a little more difficult for the falcons to attempt entering in the first place, but the ones that are open out, of course, that is a little more exposed for the birds. But you can find instructions online. So with Annie and Grinnell, when they first arrived, before there was a nest box on the campanile and had made a nesting attempt, which they were having a difficult time keeping the eggs in. So we actually went up and provided the box after they had selected the site. Attracting them to a new location is a little bit more of luck, and to whether or not what's there happens to appeal to a pair of birds at the time.
And also where there might be other peregrines in the area. They exclude roughly a 1 mile radius of other nests. For the most part, there's some wiggle room there. Lynn monitored a couple of nests that were on opposite sides of a building. So they apparently had a couple of territories that they were okay with being that close. But for the most part, you also need to potentially worry about other peregrines, excluding a new nest site.
Yeah. All right. So we have gotten this question a lot, and we unfortunately don't have a super direct answer for you yet.
We're still working on it.
So a lot of interest about last year's chicks because they were potentially fathered by both of the males, one before Grinnell died and then one after Alden arrived. And so we're looking at their DNA because we take feather samples when we band the chicks. 4 different, studies are possible to do with it. You can look at things like mercury levels in the diet potentially, which builds up in the feathers, or again, DNA. So there is a graduate student that is going to be looking at DNA of peregrine falcons across the greater California region. So they have amongst their data set Annie and Grinnell's chicks, Annie and Alden's chicks, and we'll probably have DNA from this year's chicks as well. But unfortunately, these things take time, and they're not specifically looking at our falcons, so we won't hear back for a while because this is a graduate student doing a lot of work, and as much as I would like to be, I don't think they can just move us right to the front of the line.
All right, so we mentioned the juvenile at San Jose City Hall. Previously this year, Sequoia was nesting or starting to set up a territory there with a new mate. Is he still there? Sequoia is not still there, unfortunately. This is a kind of big issue in the raptor world and the bird world in general right now. Sequoia's mate actually was died to a infection of highly pathogenic avian influenza. And this is a really, really rough disease that's sweeping through the bird world right now. And so after Sequoia's mate died, he disappeared and we haven't seen him since.
Yeah, and so it is possible that Sequoia also succumbed to bird flu, which is very few raptors, once they have it in any significant extent, are able to recover. It is also possible that Sequoia left because his mate disappeared, and without a mate, the territory may not have seemed as attractive anymore. But this will be a good moment to do a quick plug. We have gotten a lot of questions about the avian influenza. It's become a problem for the California condor populations. It is, a problem across the continent and across the globe. But we are not epidemiologists. But luckily, we have a veterinarian that is, who has offered to talk to people. And so we're going to do a Q&A with her on the 27th of April. And so hopefully she can help answer a lot of these questions about avian flu that can be difficult for us to answer just because we're conservation biologists, and it's a little bit out of our wheelhouse. All right, so this one. All right, how likely is it that all 4 eggs will hatch?
So in most cases, most of the eggs hatch. Annie has been really interesting in that every year at least one egg has not hatched. And we don't know whether this is a just random chance thing, or whether it's an intrinsic characteristic, something about Annie produces a 1 or 2 unviable eggs every year. It's possible that she is still suffering the effects of DDT contamination in the environment. The peregrine falcons as a species, although the population has recovered wonderfully from DDT, is still affected by it. There is still DDT in the environment that will persist for a long, long time. Some research has shown that there is not one single organism on this planet that doesn't have some DDT in it, even now. So it's something that's persisting and could still be having an effect on reproduction.
All right. Here's one of those interesting questions that I don't know the exact answer, but can speculate on. Do falcons kill the weakest of the bunch like other bird types do? And, peregrine falcons, they do not rely on finding the slow and injured necessarily to catch it, because they are the fastest birds in the world. They are hunting largely based on surprise and surprise from above. And so really what they're looking for is opportunities where they have an individual that they are able to swoop down on very quickly without them being noticed. And so they are being opportunistic, and they are often looking for birds that are separate from, others within a flock, which could be because it's a weakened bird that's lagging behind, but it could also just be a bird that for whatever reason got separated from the others. So they don't, necessarily need to find injured prey. They just need to find prey that is a little unlucky.
So we're getting a number of questions. I guess we kind of answered this a little bit, but maybe more directly, like what are the possibility of all 4 chicks hatching healthy this season for the first time ever? How many, what is the likelihood that we're only going to see 1 chick? We're still fairly early in the hatching process. What we consider to be kind of a synchronous hatching for peregrine falcons is within 48 hours, is roughly that window. So we're still not even a full 24 hours into the hatching process. We know one of the other eggs has pips, so it is starting to hatch. It's possible it won't fully complete hatching, but it's still pretty likely that it will. I don't think there's any thoughts right now that there's just going to be 1. It's possible, but right now it's still likely we'll have more.
Yeah, it's still anyone's guess. As time goes on, we'll know more, huh? All right, here's just a quick one that I definitely know the answer to. After all the chicks hatch and leave the nest, do we clean the nest box? And yes, we do. Once a year after they have left and after the adults are kind of at the lowest point when it comes to territory defense, we go up there. We remove prey remains. We try our best to scrape up poop and get it scrubbed out a bit, sweep up all the feather fluff. There's no way to get like a hose up there, so we can't hose stuff off, but we do the best we can to get things cleaned up, partially because it does help prevent parasites from persisting at the nest site through time that might be a problem for the falcons, and partially because otherwise it clogs up the drainage and creates problems for facilities. Yes.
This question.
Oh yeah, that's on you. You're a genetic
person.
So
this is a really good question about a really interesting quirk about bird biology. So birds are similar to mammals in that sex is determined chromosomally, except it's flipped in birds. So in mammals, the male has 2 different sex chromosomes, an X and a Y. In birds, the female has 2 different sex chromosomes, the Z and the W. In rare instances, female birds can sometimes lay viable eggs without having mated at all. And this is a process called parthenogenesis. It is a very rare occurrence, only documented a few times. But the females are basically creating clones of themselves. However, because the female falcons have a Z chromosome and a W chromosome, they are actually producing male clones of themselves because there's no bird that is a double W chromosome. That's not a viable combination of the sex chromosomes. So they can make males, but they can't make females because they can't give both a Z and a W chromosome.
I just thought of something.
What?
So Annie overwhelmingly has male offspring. Annie consistently has 1 or more eggs that doesn't develop each year. Whoa. Is Annie cloning herself?
Maybe.
Is she the ultimate falcon?
Is she producing mostly clones of herself? Maybe we'll find out when all this genetic work comes in.
This is unlikely. Parthenogenesis is very rare in birds, but whoa.
Yeah. All right. Are mites a problem in the nest? I guess, or maybe are parasites in general a problem for birds? We see Annie preening quite a bit right now. And that is one of the anti-parasite behaviors that birds do, among other things that preening does. But they do clean their feathers.
Yeah, well, I guess we alluded to that a little earlier, that part of the reason we help clean the nest is so that parasites can't produce and the material in the cannot persist in the material in the nest site quite as long. But yes, parasites are common in raptors. There's several different kinds, including feather lice, feather mites, and then there's also flat flies, hippoboscid flies that are reasonably common. And so, having handled a reasonable amount of raptors in my scientific career, peregrine falcons do tend to have somewhat lower parasite loads, but they still definitely consistently have them. All right. Is there a risk of the parents hurting already hatched chicks while they're incubating?
Yes, there is. It's relatively low. The chicks' bones when they are just hatched are actually relatively floppy. So they're kind of hard to break. That said, you could still have a individual, the parent that's much larger than them, stepping on them and hurting them. Um, Typically, though, peregrines and other raptors are very careful when they are moving around their chicks. You'll see them kind of curling up their talons like this to make sure that they are not stepping on their chicks with their talons.
All right, look at me picking more questions that I don't know the answer to. I love those. But somebody does have an estimate of how many falcon pairs there are in California currently, because the Predatory Bird Research Group in Santa Cruz has done a lot of work watching and monitoring falcon nests throughout the Greater Bay Area and throughout California. We cannot know for sure how many pairs there are at this point because they do, often nest in urban areas and cities. And so people do have a pretty good idea of how many pairs are in urban areas, but then they can also easily nest on ledges out in mountains. Yosemite has a well-known population of falcons that are monitored, but there is a lot of the Sierra Nevada mountains that is not frequented by humans and could easily have a lot of peregrine falcons. But I would look up the Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research Group, and their website has information about falcon populations in the greater California area and how that has changed through time. So I don't have that answer, but somebody does. Do you happen to remember from our conversations with Zika?
I want to say in the Bay Area, there's somewhere around 30 active nests.
Yes. Zika said they knew of about 34. They suspected a few more than that. But shout out to Zika Gluck, the director of the Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research Group, who is, overseeing a lot of the falcon research, a lot of the falcon conservation work, who works a lot with us. So thank you for everything you do. Yeah.
All right. Do male peregrines have a higher mortality rate than females? Actually, they do. We actually typically see females staying at nest sites longer than males. And this could also maybe not be entirely due to mortality, but also to being driven off by younger males, whereas females might be more likely to maintain the territory. But often we see females maintaining territories for longer than males, and this makes a lot of sense when you consider that they have to hunt for 2 months longer out of the year than females do, which is a dangerous behavior.
All right. So since I did a little shout out to Zika, this gives me an opportunity to do a shout out to more people. How many people control the camera? It seems like there's someone always at the camera, and there are quite a few people that are part of Cal Falcons that are working together to manage the cameras, to do outreach. And so among those, there's Mary Malik, Falcon biologist extraordinaire, Alan Fish, biologist at Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, Doug Bell, biologist for East Bay Regional Parks, photographer Bridget Ahern, let's see, Jan Ambrosini does a lot of work. Let's see, Sharon Pollock helps out. So
yeah, a lot of people, and we just cannot thank them enough for all the work that they put into this. what do we all ultimately think happened to Alden? So this, I'm going to preface this by saying this is pure speculation. We have absolutely no evidence.
Right now, the answer is we don't know, but there are a few possible things that might have happened.
So honestly, I think the most likely scenario is that he might have also succumbed to the avian influenza epidemic. Unfortunately, it appears that the one of the more kind of vulnerable subsets of falcons are those that hunt shorebirds. Shorebirds are carriers of avian influenza, and so he was a pretty much strict shorebird hunter, and he may have been particularly vulnerable to that. I also like the idea that he's just out there looking for another nest. I mean, he definitely could have made it and just gone and found a different area. Um, we really have no way of knowing, especially because he wasn't banded. So if a body is recovered, we won't know it was him.
All right. So this is kind of a good question because we have been observing this on the ground a little bit. So there's ravens with a nest by the football stadium. So that's as the crow flies, very close to the campanile. Are the falcons interested in their eggs and babies? Are the ravens interested in the falcons' babies? Do they pose a risk to one another? And the answer is the falcons are unlikely to interfere with the nest itself, although the falcons are quite likely to be interested in trying to hunt a fledgling raven that may not have a lot of experience yet in flying. So the falcons do pose a threat to the ravens, and the ravens, similarly, knowing that falcons are a predator of their chicks, will mob the falcons, will attack the falcons, and they are known to occasionally eat falcon eggs or chicks if they are left undefended. We have in the last couple days actually seen the ravens and the falcons interacting and fighting with one another. So there is a danger there. Annie and Lou are, pretty strongly defending the nest. I don't feel super concerned about the eggs and chicks, but it does pose a concern. And also the ravens, when the juveniles are first starting to learn to fly, ravens will often try to ground the juveniles to keep them from getting up and flying.
Do you know the proportion of how many are killed by being knocked out mid-flight with a talon fist versus grabbed with the talons and carried live? So falcons, this is an interesting quirk about falcon hunting, is they are ambush predators. They dive from a great height at a great speed, and basically their goal is to punch their prey right in the back of the neck as hard as they can before the prey even knows that they're there, instantly breaking their neck and killing them. So the vast majority of the falcon's hunts that are successful try to do that. I do not know the exact proportion of successful hunts that way, or those that versus those that catch a bird in kind of more of a pursuit, where they catch kind of a live prey and maybe carry it back. So I wish I knew better. Perhaps that might be a good info from a falconer if we can find a falconer to ask that information.
All right, and let's see. So this is just a thing I want to address. We do have a listener who is uses ASL and would like captions, and we ourselves do not know how to get the captions to work. But if anybody is able to advise that,
we would listen. We've been looking for the settings on that, but
we would definitely listen. We would like that advice, or if anybody knows where for future Q&As we'd be able to get somebody to help with interpretation, we would really appreciate that, because we would like to make this more available, and hopefully maybe for our next Q&A when we can talk with the vet Victoria Hall, we'll have that figured out.
All right. Carolina wrens put their nest in my Jeep. Any recommendations? You're gonna have to get a new Jeep.
Yep,
Sorry.
definitely. Well, yeah, actually, this is a tricky one. If they have just built the nest and have not laid eggs yet, I would recommend removing the nest. Wrens can build nests pretty quickly, and oftentimes wrens will actually build multiple nests before they settle on a specific one they intend to use. So if there aren't eggs in there, I'd attempt to move that relatively quickly. If there are eggs in there, I am not sure legally what sort of interaction you're supposed to have with bird species. But if you relocated a nest very slightly, adult birds would continue to tend to that nest. But yeah, I'm not sure if I have great official advice to provide.
What is our favorite part of work with the Falcons?
Oh, I just like making people happy.
Yeah, it's really fun to have something positive to just share with everyone. I just really enjoy when I was growing up, the kind of thought of seeing a peregrine falcon was something that would kind of never cross my mind. It was something that was such a rare occurrence that would be like something that I just could not imagine. And so seeing them at the school that I went to is just such an amazing treat to have them right in the backyard of Cal, and I have really been excited to see that. That's what makes I've been really enjoying.
All right. So I just regarding the captions thing from StreamYard, we cannot access the feed to turn on captions, but potentially if we can get into our own YouTube channel, although we're kind of getting to the end of this,
Yeah,
we can add.
we will try to figure this out for the next time. All right. How are falcons affected during wildfire season? Does the smoke bother them? Yes, birds have very sensitive breathing systems. They take in a tremendous amount of air. They have a very different system than us. It's not an in-out system. It's more of a circular system. But so they can be relatively highly affected by wildfire. Luckily, though, they can leave. So if there's a lot of smoke in the air, we would expect them to leave.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the process of trying to get a project together to try to get more information about how migratory birds react to smoke. So hopefully that will happen sometime in the future, but we'll find out. Let's see. So we only have a few more minutes left here. And now there are so many good questions that we've gotten, and I feel like we're going to need we're going to need more opportunities to do Q&As in the future. Let's see.
All right. How many eggs has Annie laid since 2016? So let's see. Let's count them. We had 5 eggs laid the first year. 2 of those hatched. So the first year, Annie laid her first set of eggs in a broken open sandbag. So there, 2 of those eggs rolled off to the side because it was just not a good nest structure. When we went up there to put a temporary nest tray in, there were 3 eggs there, and 2 of those hatched. There were 4 eggs. We actually don't know how many eggs were laid for sure the second year because we didn't have cams. We saw
And at no point did we enter the nest site that year.
until banding. So I think it was 4 and 3 hatched that year. And then we had 4 laid and 2 hatched the next year. She's laid 4 pretty much every year except for the first year where she laid 5, and then last year where she laid 3-ish. We think she laid a 4th egg, just not in the nest. And so we added it all up. I think it's around 20 eggs that she's laid.
Yeah. Okay. I want to bring this out because I want to advocate for Alden. Would Alden had an injured leg, would that have played a role in his possible demise? And the answer is actually probably not. Alden, as we had seen consistently throughout last year, was very good at defending the nest site. Alden was able to hunt successfully. He always was able to consistently bring in prey, so he had clearly been thriving despite the injury. So I do not think it played a role in his disappearance from the nest site. You know, it's if he had adapted to it, then he had adapted to it, and I don't think it was holding him back that much. And I just want to advocate for Alden there because there was an article in the Chronicle that they alluded to that being something, and it just isn't true. That injury was not what put him at a disadvantage. Just peregrine falcons all the time lose their nest site for one reason or another, or select different nest sites for one reason or another, or of course, yeah, avian flu is out there as well.
All right, we had a comment, wild animals should remain wild and free, not banded for our own curiosity. Well, luckily, we are not banding them for our own curiosity. All of the work that we do with banding is 100% directed at conservation and maintaining these healthy wild populations of birds. The data that comes from banding is incredibly valuable for understanding how populations and birds move through the environment, where they are using different areas, and how those populations are doing. There is no, there's very strict controls over who bans birds and why. You can't just do it for no reason at all. You have to have a very good, valid scientific reason. So we will ban these birds, but it is entirely for their benefit, not for ours.
Yeah, it is one of the most effective ways to get a very clear estimate of population just based on if you know how many birds have been banded in a population, and you know how often when you go out to observe how often you see banded birds and unbanded birds, you can kind of do the math and get an actual number for how many birds are likely to be present in that population, and you can start to understand how populations are changing. So I guess I would like to say I wish it wasn't necessary to be closely monitoring populations of many of these species. I guess I would like to say that they're wild and free, and at no point do we need to know how many they are because, you know, that's how it is. But that knowledge is important for conservation, for understanding what's going on, and for knowing if there's any emergent threats to the species. DDT is banned. That was a pesticide that was for a long time the biggest problem, but now there are many rodenticides that may pose a problem. Mercury may pose a problem, and we will want to know about that before so many birds are lost that you just stop seeing them at all.
I think this is going to be our last question that we have time for, and I think it's a great one. From the third graders, what is the typical lifespan for a peregrine falcon? So the max lifespan in the wild is 20 years. We can sometimes see a few that go beyond that. It's not super common to live that long. We are often seeing peregrine falcons that have reached this stage of life, that they have established a territory, that they are living roughly a dozen to 15 years. So Annie is kind of firmly in the middle-aged category right now. And Lou, we kind of think he's probably on the younger side, and might last still live quite a bit from now. Anything else we want to cover before we?
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty more that I'd like to cover, but we do need to get going. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry about technical difficulties. As I said, this is a mom and pop operation, literally, because our son is right over there trying to play quietly for us. But thanks everyone so much for watching. Thanks for your interest, and just it makes me so happy to know that so many people are interested in these birds, are interested in their well-being, and have that curiosity, because it feels like something really important to me. And I think it's also important to see this example of wildlife in our own backyard, conservation efforts that have really worked. And so let's all keep that in mind. The conservation efforts can work. Wildlife is in our backyard, and people can do great things if they just really work at it. But it's hard sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks everyone, and enjoy the fluffy chick, and hopefully we'll be having a 1, 2, or 3 more in the next few hours to next day.